As with any photograph featuring busy scenes, particularly black and white images, it takes a moment for the human brain to break down the overall picture before then noticing individual details held within a mishmash of black and white shapes. The added distraction of 150 years of wear and tear on glass plate negatives, such as seen within the Holtermann Collection, also hinders the perspective of the brain, where the depth and contrasts are often lost within the photograph itself. For the artist of this exhibition, the purpose is to remove these distractions, therefore isolating specific details onto a clean white background. And in this case, these details are the faces in the crowd.
It's been said that adding color is a somewhat desecration or vandalization of these beautiful old photos. But if the photographer would have had the opportunity to use color film over black and white over 150 years ago, then I think the decision would be rather clear. Crystal clear.
If time travel was possible, you might ask yourself, would you go forward and possibly regret what you see? Or go back and get answers to questions that you thought were not imaginable? Either way, the journey through time and space, even for the most cautious, would have diabolical consequences for what we perceive as the present, but more importantly, the future. But what if we could travel as an observer without altering the sliding doors of time? Between the years of 1863 and 1873, a man by the name of Henry Beaufoy Merlin managed to punch a hole through time, drawing people from the future back to a period where time was the present. This man was way ahead in the field of pioneering photography and managed to create a portal into the past, which has created a time machine within itself.
Between the years 1863 and 1871, Merlin travelled extensively throughout Victoria and New South Wales, taking thousands upon thousands of photographs along the way, therefore capturing a very young and raw Australia as a single and precise moment in time. By 1872, over 150 years ago, Merlin, accompanied by his young assistant, Charles Bayliss, and their photographic travelling wagon, arrived at the New South Wales gold mining towns of Hill End and Golgong. It was here where they set up their studio called The American, an Australasian photographic studio on Tambaroora Street in Hill End. It was at about this time that Merlin and Bayliss's work was beginning to attract the attention of a German immigrant who was becoming very interested in the developing science of photography. This gentleman had become very wealthy as a result of the discovery of several large gold-bearing reef veins in his Star of Hope mine at nearby Hawkins Hill. His name was Bernhard Otto Holtermann. Holtermann was already very rich as a result of these finds, but a new discovery would later propel him into an entirely different level of wealth. At 2 a.m. on the morning of the 19th of October, 1872, workers deep below in Holtermann's Star of Hope mine were dazzled by a veritable wall of gold. Under Holtermann's instructions, a section of the wall was to be cut free and brought to the surface in one giant mass. But it wasn't until the light of day that the full extent of the find was actually realized. Upon being weighed and measured, the monster find weighed in at almost 280 kilos, 1.5 meters tall, 24 inches in width, and with an average thickness of 4 inches, the Holtermann nugget, or as it rightly should be referred as, the Holtermann specimen, is still to this day the largest single mass of gold ever to be found anywhere in the world. The find would supply Holtermann and all his workers with enough disposable income for life. Holtermann not only adopted Australia as his home, he absolutely embraced it. He had the idea to promote it around the world as a rapidly developing nation and not a penal colony. So, he commissioned Merlin to take as many photographs of the Hill End and surrounding goldfields as possible to take around the world. The result was a stunning collection of thousands of images of street scenes, including homes and schools, churches and businesses. It was Google Street View in 1872. Sadly, Merlin passed away in Sydney the following year in 1873, and it was left to Charles Bayliss to carry on Merlin's work for Holtermann. With the fortune he had amassed, Holtermann moved back to Sydney, where he built a mansion in the North Shore suburb of St. Leonard's, the tower of which was designed as a huge camera. From this vantage point, Bayliss took equally huge panoramas of the developing city of Sydney. These wet plate negatives are the world's largest, one measuring 10 meters long, which astonished audiences overseas, winning a bronze medal at the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition and a silver at the 1878 Paris Exposition Universelle Internationale. Holtermann even took some of the glass plates back to his birthplace in the German city of Hamburg in 1879, where they were also very well received. Holtermann passed away in his home in Sydney on the day of his 47th birthday, April 29, 1885. In the years that followed, he slowly disappeared from memory, and so too did the negatives. Despite the apparent disappearance of the glass plates, a few hard copy paper photographs of these negatives were still circulating amongst collectors and photo enthusiasts. However, they were almost entirely unidentified, both in the locations of where they were taken and their creator. 1951, 66 years after the negatives were lost, a photographic journalist by the name of Eric Keast Burke, who had been analysing these photos, recognised some of them as been taken in Hill End and had previously done some research on the old historic gold mining town, so far away in the New South Wales Central West. Burke wasn't totally oblivious to Holtermann and his legacy at Hill End, and he was also well aware of his travelling photographic exhibitions around the world. He knew there had to be glass plate copies of these old photos somewhere, but where? Burke wrote to the Mitchell Library in Sydney, where he had seen several 19th century panoramas attached to Holtermann's name, and inquired if they knew of where the negatives were possibly located. They replied that his daughter-in-law, Mary Holtermann, lived in Chatswood and might know of their whereabouts. So, Burke made the decision to send his colleague, Vivian Curnow, to Chatswood to knock on the door of Mary Holtermann. The door was answered by her son, also named Bernhard, where he informed Curnow that his mother Mary had passed away 2 months previous. Holtermann told Mr. Curnow that he remembered seeing some old photographs in a shed behind the house, but it had been locked for many years. Mr. Curnow and Mr. Holtermann then broke the lock, and in the hope of finding just a few of the lost plates, Curnow entered the shed. Eric Keast Burke's search for Holtermann's lost negatives had finally come to an end, but in the hope of finding just a few, Burke was instead overwhelmed by the extent of the discovery. Neatly stacked in cedar boxes and in lacquered tins, and undisturbed for nearly 80 years, there were not 1 or 2, but at the final count, there were 3,500 of Holtermann's long-lost glass plates. Following the discovery, the negatives were donated to the Mitchell Library in 1952 by Bernhard Holtermann's grandson, where they then became known as the Holtermann Collection. Between 2011 and 2012, the negatives were cleaned and rescanned at high resolution, enabling the viewer to zoom in and look at minute details that have not been seen in 150 years. And by 2013, it was recognised as possibly the most significant record of Australia's history, and as a result, was added to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, UNESCO, Australian Memory of the World Register. I hope you enjoy the Faces in the Crowd exhibition.
A steady stream of horses, carts and coaches raise choking dust along an almost indiscernible track and send the screeching galahs reeling over the scrub-covered slopes of a soon-to-be-famous Red Hill. Saunders and party are busy clearing trees from their mine site to reveal the extent of a quartz outcrop. A calico tent, bark hut, and stable is a statement as to the confidence of their find. The original occupants of this land, the Wiradjuri people, have been visiting this area for many, many years. It's known to them as the place of a deep water hole. They have a name for this reference. They call it Golgong. With the discovery of gold, the town of Golgong hastily rose up from the raw Australian landscape. The song of native birds and the buzzing of concealed insects that once were the only audible sounds were now being replaced by the noise of carpentry and industry, working from sunup until sundown. The sudden influx of men and their families brought with them their dogs, their livestock, and their religions. They cared not for the scars left on the unique bush or the previous fauna and flora. Else, they were here in search of gold, and just as important, the commerce that was vital to support it. By 1872, Golgong was at the peak of its production. The miners continued to scour above and deep beneath the pitted and gouged surface in search of what was rarely but mostly unobtainable, and the traveling photographer, Henry Beaufoy Merlin, was there to capture it. And while the laborious back-breaking work was relentlessly forging on for the men, the women otherwise nurtured the growing population, and in accordance began to develop a communal environment for their families to coexist within. For all their good intentions, they were still once again completely oblivious to the environmental raping and pillaging of the landscape that their men were committing. Regardless, Golgong evolved into a thriving and prosperous little metropolis in the middle of the Australian bush that otherwise probably would not have ever existed. And again, in conjunction with the mining industry, Merlin was also there to arrest the developing and equally thriving community. And so, it was here on the Golgong goldfield in 1872 where he also managed to capture the faces in the crowd. Town improvements. Golgong is being rapidly improved by its general appearance. This comes about not only in the superior kind of dwellings and houses of business, but in the alterations that are made by straightening lines and smoothing corners. Queen Street is now very compact and almost uninterruptedly elegant for nearly 3/4 of a mile. The Australian Town and Country, Saturday the 28th of December, 1872.
Although, most likely, a very well-respected resident of Golgong during the gold rush period of the 1870s, not a lot is otherwise known about Edward Tarrant's life prior to his arrival. What we do know is what he was doing in Golgong in 1872. But let us ask the man himself.
Good day to you. My name is Edward Tarrant, but folks call me Ted for short. I am the proprietor of the Tattersall's Hotel on Herbert Street in Golgong, and I have the great pleasure of informing my friends and visitors to the goldfield that I have at great expense erected and fitted up the forementioned first-class house, which will be found to be the best hotel in the township, replete with every comfort. Tattersall's offers to travellers every convenience usually enjoyed in a leading city, and may justly be styled second to none in the western districts. As the proprietor, my object is to ensure a second visit from all who come once, and I have therefore spared no pains to provide unrivaled accommodation. Good bedrooms, a capital table, and a well-stocked cellar, along with cleanliness and civility, are among what my house affords, and such. Stabling always provided with the very best forage, and under the charge of an experienced groom, cannot be found within miles of Golgong. An excellent billiard table for the use of visitors, and coaches run to and from Mudgee daily. So, I very much look forward to your next visit to Golgong.
Unfortunately, there is no single photo of Tarrant's Tattersall's Hotel that survives in the Holtermann Collection, which is unfortunate as it was reputed to be the best hotel in Golgong. The gold rush of the early 1870s brought with it a wide range of professionals eager to capitalize on the booming growth of Golgong. Most were willing to cash in on its wealth, while others were essential workers that were necessary to sustain its production. This is George Reed, another of the faces in the crowd in Golgong in 1872. So George, can you possibly tell us what brought you here to Golgong?
Hello there, my name is George Alfred Reed. I was born in 1852 on the banks of the Nepean River at the foot of the Blue Mountains in the little settlement of Penrith. Now, I am a little embarrassed to say, but the truth is my father was sent to Australia as a convict with his brother, my uncle, for housebreaking. Despite this somewhat challenging start to life, I am now proud to say that I have overcome my disadvantages, where at the age of 18, I became a very effective postmaster at the rich and famous gold mining towns of Tambaroora and Hill End. And now, here in Golgong, I am the postmaster at the telegraph office, where I must say I have seen some very stirring times.
At the time, George wouldn't have known that he would later move to the Sydney suburb of St Leonards, where he continued his career. George Reed retired after 47 years of service at the age of 60. Throughout history, the demographic nature of people was to naturally fall into classes who all shared a common place, and nothing much has changed today. Of course, there was the upper class, who were born privileged, well-educated, and articulately spoke the Queen's English, albeit with a large plum in their mouths. Below these well-refined toffs were the middle class, who managed to develop a difficult trade and turn it into a somewhat successful business. But no matter how hard they worked or how successful they became, the upper class was always well out of reach. And then there was the simple, lower class who shared none of the attributes of the demographics above them. They worked tirelessly for the business owners for low wages and poor conditions, just so they could put bread on the table for their ever-growing families. Some could read, but not write, but most could do neither, where they signed their name with an X. Inclusive of this bottom of the barrel were the miners, an almost class of their own. And the irony of this is that all the above classes would not be in Golgong without them. This man is Lester Donaldson. He stands proud and well assured of himself. Lester appears to fit into this scene like a square peg in a round hole. So, which class might Mr. Donaldson best be described as? Let's say hello and see if we can work it out.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Lester Stuart Donaldson, and unlike some of the convicts or the commoners that taint the town of Golgong, my father, Sir Stuart Donaldson, was the first Premier of the fine state of New South Wales. My role here as the Clerk of Petty Sessions is to keep a very close eye over these uncultured swines that are digging these bottomless holes all over our land.
Well, there is no mistaking Mr. Donaldson's pedigree and obvious standing in the community, and it is quite true, Lester Stuart Donaldson was the son of Sir Stuart Donaldson, New South Wales's first Premier. While still in Golgong, and aside from his duties as a clerk, Lester was also an accomplished actor and performer and starred in many shows between Golgong and Mudgee. Some even said that he was so good that he could have made a successful career on stage, but he persisted in government office in various roles around the central west of New South Wales before arriving in Sydney, where he became the police magistrate and later also a well-respected law magistrate. Lester Stuart Donaldson passed away on the 18th of January 1924 in his home in Neutral Bay. He was 83 years of age. And last, but certainly by no means least, is this beautiful young woman. Her name is Miss Elizabeth Richards. Elizabeth was sent to Golgong to execute possibly one of the most important roles on the goldfield. And if the town was expected to grow and prosper, Elizabeth and a handful of other dedicated professionals needed to strive and succeed in their chosen field. Good morning to you, Miss Richards. Could you please enlighten the audience of your intentions in Golgong in 1872 and beyond?
Thank you, kind sir, and a very good morning to you too. Yes, my name is Elizabeth Ann Richards, and I beg respectively to inform the parents of Golgong that I have opened a girls' school in the Church of England building, pending the erection of a suitable school premises, where a sound English education will be imparted. As it is not my intention to receive boys, parents may feel assured that every attention will be paid to the education of the girls entrusted to my care.
Miss Richards married James Dillon, another of Golgong's teachers, in 1872, shortly after this photo was taken. They remained in Golgong for 6 years before immigrating to the United States of America in 1878, where they raised a family. Mrs. Elizabeth Dillon, née Richards, passed away on the 26th of January 1907 in her home in New York. She was just 55 years of age.
A new day is beginning to dawn over the goldfields of Golgong. Most of the town is still sleeping peacefully, albeit to the rhythmic sound, but moreover the vibration of colossal, crushing machines. And despite still being the dead of night, these machines take no respite from pounding precious gold-bearing quartz rocks into fragmented oblivion. This productive and essential racket relentlessly smashes the minerals to eventually extract what the miners deem as rightfully theirs to take. This distant sound is comparable to the reassuring pulse you sometimes hear in your head at night, just before you fall asleep, for this rumble of pounding equipment is also the pulse of this town. The smoky haze emanating from overnight chimneys and bush camps dissipates and is further absorbed into the brilliantly scorched sunrise, which promises a crisp but pleasant winter's day. And still, the pounding continues. It was one of these cool, frosty mornings in 1872 that Henry Beaufoy Merlin and his futuristic soul-capturing equipment set out from Mudgee on their journey toward Golgong. He is first alerted to his approach drawing ever so closer by the distant, regular thumping of a single stamper battery, as they call them. But before too long, this solo, almost mesmerizing and invisible performance is amalgamated into a backing recital, seamlessly dissolving into a crescendo of countless iron monsters, all playing completely out of rhythm, albeit to the familiar rumbling melody of a productive goldfield. Merlin is on a mission. However, his agenda is not in the pursuit of gold, but moreover to photograph and record the social, the commerce, and the industry. Who is? But while the stranger is somewhat welcome to record their development, there are also some that aren't too sure. And still, the pounding continues. Upon his arrival, Merlin explains his intentions to the growing curiosity of the high end of town. They willingly participate in the creation of well-orchestrated scenes that most will probably never get to see the results of. He records the wall-to-wall hub of commerce along Queen, Herbert, and Medley streets, before finding his way to the residential district, which consists of crude bark huts and just a few slightly more developed structures. But this sparsely populated end of town is the essence of the community, for this region is the heart of the town and is home to the blacksmiths, saddlers, tinsmiths, and the numerous saw pits. But, unlike the trustworthy high end, these hardened laborers are simple folk, just out to survive and provide. They emerge out from their dim, cramped dwellings, like worried prisoners to an outside world they are not accustomed to.
Who are these men? And what are they doing?
They ask. Merlin does his best to reassure them, but he also further stresses their responsibility to remain completely motionless for at least 8 to 10 seconds in order to capture a clear image of their day-to-day business. Or, as they might assume, maybe the capture of their very souls. And still, the pounding continues. While the curiosity has got the better of the people in the top-end streets, they are still a little unsure, but do their utmost to appear unfazed, like a subtle scratch of the nose, before then returning to a more confident but cautious stance. The tough exterior of the weather-beaten miner will not allow to show any anxiety as he confidently stands his ground. The children and the younger boys and girls are especially suspicious of Merlin's movements.
Are you seeing this? What are they doing?
Charlie McEwen, a proud and very protective Scotsman, stands by his darling wife, who casts a watchful eye over the unfolding situation.
Do not worry, my dear. I won't let anything happen to you.
These captured souls would eventually become static representations of a time long since past, and they would later often become a fleeting source of curiosity and amusement for many generations in the future. They are almost perceived as fictional black and white characters by their forthcoming and judgmental peers that never really seem quite real to them. But their preceding ancestors don't see the funny side. Because their descendants will never know the hardships that enabled their very existence. But they were real people with real jobs and very real lives. They were our second and third great-grandparents. They were not without color or personalities, else they were told not to move for 10 seconds by a stranger. An eccentric-looking Englishman, aiming a contraption the likes of which they had never seen before, and what's more, directly into their faces, while he himself took refuge under a black cloak of darkness from whatever it was that the faces would be exposed to. And still, the pounding continues. These faces in the crowd came from all corners of the globe and were all thrown together into a melting pot of characters with differing opinions and beliefs. Of these characters, the Chinese were very numerous, sometimes outnumbering the apparent superior Europeans. However, they were strictly prohibited from mining activities. But men like William Sack were renowned for their affordable and accommodating boarding houses, along with their optimistic personalities. Many were just one, or even less than one generation on from convicts and the soldiers that were sent here to guard them. It is a time where there is still no distinct true Australian, but there soon will be. And unknown to the authorities of this new land, Australia became a social experiment that was born out of a problematic situation, a solution as it were. And it worked. This raw, inhospitable, but very rich country dragged the best out of an assorted bunch of social misfits and free settlers of who were believed to be quite mad for willingly moving to a land on the other side of the earth that was otherwise set aside for the worst criminals. For transportation to this God-forsaken place was seen to be a fate worse than the hangman's noose. Many from both sides of the demographic scale failed to make an honest living out of the limited opportunities available to them. But of the ones who did, ventured out deep into the rugged interior and forged out an existence that would ultimately provide a self-sufficient income that would later support themselves, and also that of their future generations until the present day. These are now the generations that see these static, black and white faces in the crowd as a fleeting source of curiosity and amusement. They came to places like Golgong, where they became storekeepers. Miners. Woodcutters. Policemen. And sign writers. And still, the pounding continues. That is until the Sabbath. A day that symbolizes a sacred pause from work to focus on spirituality, family, and community. But as the mild winter's day again turns to freezing night, the pounding yet again returns and will not abate for a further 6 more days and nights. Thank you for watching The Faces in the Crowd.